is up, everyone? I'm Elias,
I'm Luke.
And I'm Liam.
and this is episode 3 of The Listening Circle. Every episode, we discuss music news, albums, and general opinions on music-related topics. And today, we're going to talk about the music industry, how it's evolving, what the implications are of digital media and the internet, and the role that record labels play. But first, we're going to go ahead and hop into our rotation segment. So, Liam, why don't you start? What have you been listening to this past couple weeks?
Well, there are two albums I want to talk about today. The first is from this band called The Armed, their Untitled album from 2012. I've been listening to that a lot over the last few weeks, and I think it's an album that's just getting better and better to me every time I hear it because it's just such a crazy album, but it does so much like different between every song. It's hard to skip tracks on that kind of album. Very solid. I've also been getting back into this band called Richelieu, specifically with their first album, Terrace Famus. Very good album in my opinion. A lot like Tool, but without the metal in it really, or any like the abstract lyricism. It's much more ground level in lyrics, and so it's much more relatable, I find. But still very well written and impassioned and all this. Very well made music. I think Richelieu is very, very good.
Awesome. What about you, Luke?
I haven't found myself really finding many new artists. I've actually for the past couple of weeks, I've been, especially since the weird sudden hype that people are saying, oh, metal's gonna make a second return and stuff. I've kind of been going back to stuff from 10 years ago. Just I haven't really been going through albums, but just scattered tracks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the stuff we probably would have listened to in high school.
Yeah.
But other than that, I got into I don't really know how to pronounce his name, but I think it's called Weiss, or he's called Weiss. It's some kind of it's like this weird synthwave kind of electronic music that I've been getting into. It's nice. It's very aggressive kind of sounding music, but that's
Sounds like Darkwave then.
yeah. I actually I don't know what the genre is. I got exposed to it and I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. So I just gave his albums a shot and kind of just been listening to them at work.
Rad.
How is it spelled?
Wice.
Okay.
So it's either Weiss or Wissy. I don't know, something like that. But it sounds pretty good. I would recommend you guys give him a shot.
Nice. For me, it's been a lot of Beach House. I started getting into them a week ago. It's pretty outside of a lot of the normal stuff I listen to, except for I guess some shoegaze artists or whatever. But yeah, very chill vibes, and that's definitely been the mood I've been in lately. And then the new Denzel Curry album, not new anymore, but a few months ago. That's probably gonna be my album of the year. Been listening to that a lot. The new Car Bomb album, and I meant to listen to the new Lightning Bolt album that dropped yesterday. People are saying
Didn't catch that.
yeah, it's supposed to be kind of a return to form for them with their early, more kind of experimental stuff. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. 'Cause I loved Fantasy Empire. I think that was my favorite album of theirs. But yeah, that's sort of been what I've been into lately. A lot of different stuff from all around. Cool. So let's go ahead and hop into our main topic. So we were going to talk about the music industry and sort of where it's at right now and sort of the different, I guess, critiques people have about where things are headed in the commercialization of music. And a lot of people like to talk about sort of there's a lot of artists who feel like they lack an ability to and this has been going on for a long time, to sort of creatively express themselves because of the pressures to, create music that's financially successful and conform to certain standards and things like that. And one of the first things I wanted to bring up is how do we feel about trends in music? Obviously, trends have been a part of consumer culture ever since a long time ago, ever since capitalism sort of
Ever since
grew.
things could be marketed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to think about how a lot of people think of trends as if something's trendy, then it's just it's following a trend and therefore it's not real in some way. It's not a true expression of art or whatever. And then on the contrary, like you could also look at trends as just kind of a natural sociological phenomenon, how, people tend to follow each other, people tend to, get into things at the same time. And so kind of curious to hear like what your perspectives are on like whether or not trends have affected music in a positive or negative way.
Well, I will say I definitely agree with the latter perspective a lot more. I do think it is just a psychology essentially of how trends work, and I do think with the internet age, I think trends are going to be a lot faster, but the good trends are going to stick around longer, and just like actually stick to an artist or maybe even an entire genre of music.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a really good topic. Um, Trends, yeah, they've always been sort of a thing integrated in society, and I do agree that it is something where a bunch of people will gravitate towards to at a given time, or whatever is, uh, you know, catchy or what people like to lean towards. And then, there's the counter side of that where you're saying, I don't want to misquote you, but you mentioned that uh, people feel like it's an area where their creative expression um, cannot be recognized, and other people, it's all fake. It's not
Yeah,
real.
kind
I
of
don't think
like,
that's true though.
you don't think so?
I think because obviously, like, to the people who are pushing that trend or are involved with their own, creative work, it's real to them.
Hmm.
It's their work, and it's just successful. Maybe a bit to a higher degree because it's following the trend. And
Mm-hmm.
I think in that sense, it's kind of just feels like kind of like a Debbie Downer thing to say, like, oh, that's not real. It's just trendy stuff. But it's like that just sounds kind of negative to me.
And I want to mention on that point that I think a lot of people just have knee jerk reactions and accuse other people of following trends too easily,
Definitely.
especially when
Yeah.
certain genres or subgenres might just explode out of nowhere and even become like a meme. Like vaporwave comes to mind to me. Like
Hmm.
if you make vaporwave music now, you're probably gonna get called a poser by someone, and I don't think that's fair at all.
Right. Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about how like because I think we're all on sort of on the same page there, but I see so many articles nowadays that are like, "Oh, rock is dead," and therefore, like, the mainstream doesn't respect like true,
But
instrumentalism,
like,
true talent and stuff
come
like
on.
that.
I think we know that's not true.
No,
Like,
that absolutely
we've
isn't
we've been
true.
to what, at least like one or two rock concerts in the past year or something, or
Hmm.
maybe something where it's not necessarily trendy. Those things are lively. People go there
Yeah.
with absolute love and respect for the bands there.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's just it pertains to a demographic that was very hyped like 20, 30 years ago, and it's just not as hyped right now, and it's
Yeah.
trends.
And I mean, rock music kind of was in the like dominant, sphere of music culture up until like, maybe the
I
2000s.
would say like early 2010s it started really dying out.
Yeah. And I feel like that's really just due to rock's like lack of innovation compared to hip hop nowadays.
Yeah.
But also I would also argue that a lot of alternative rock and a lot of radio rock, so to speak, has just been so muddied and boiled down ever since the early 2000s
Hmm.
even.
Well, didn't
Um,
every era kind of have its own like sound to it?
sure.
Yeah. But I guess like I could see like what exactly examples would you bring to mind of like 2000s kind of like
Well, I think what I'm specifically talking about is that once the 90s ended, I think a lot of people kind of, at least a lot of people who make music, forgot how to like acknowledge their own aesthetic. Like a lot of people just try to be as clean and as straightforward as possible. That's actually why um, when alternative rock was still really big, even in the later, like it was still pretty big in the late 2000s, I would argue. But I never was a very fond of that. That's why I kind of started gravitating to metal and just like hardcore punk and just heavier sounds than that.
Yeah, I can agree to that. I think when the early 2000s kind of rolled around, I found myself uh getting my ears buried in like different kinds of metal, prog metal, new metal, cuz
Yeah.
I would say that that was probably a high point for that kind of music. I don't know. I wouldn't say that those things ever kind of got trendy except for maybe like RAR XD days, which we shouldn't have to talk about.
Oh man.
um but yeah, I'll have to agree with you there. I feel like it did have its sound at the time, especially when it was at its peak. It had a very recognizable and sound that pertained to a much broader audience. And I just think as years go by, decades go by, it just starts to dilute. And maybe that also has to do with something with other subgenres kind of like branching out. Like I know you said that. Sorry, I never want to misquote people. I feel like like a jerk when I do that. But the way you expressed it is you felt like rap or hip hop kind of has like a better branching out experience than like rock did.
I
I think
think
that's
so.
true.
Yeah, definitely.
I think rock did have something like that, but perhaps just not as strong. Like
Yeah.
it kind
I
of
will
faded
agree with
out.
that too. I think rock's strongest point where it was starting to split up into multiple points was when it was starting to become like rock and punk, where it was starting to become more dignified.
For
Although it
sure.
is before our time a little bit.
Yeah.
With hip hop, it's much easier to say because like there's trap and stuff like that. Trap is definitely something that has been particularly like I guess you could describe as poppy, like as pop sensibility to a point,
Mm.
because the it's trap essentially describes the rhythmic flow of it, and that kind
Yeah.
of rhythmic flow is very easy to just listen to.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can say I'm very happy for the trap trend right now. I think it resulted in a lot of really good music out there. And I think that speaks to like what can be fun about trends is whenever a lot of people are into something at one time, it kind of makes it. I don't know. I like going places and hearing the kind of music I like,
Yeah, for
like
sure.
if I'm just going around to a friend's house or whatever it may be. And I think there's a very social aspect to music, and I mean, really every culture,
Absolutely.
where like it's just more fun to like things when other people are into it.
It's a different experience from putting headphones in and just listening to music you like for yourself than going to a venue or a location understanding like, oh, I'm here for the same reason as these people.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a weird unspoken connection, and
Hmm.
that's a really cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, trends will be trends. There's not much more to say other than I do think personally pop has kind of like literal pop has kind of just like spiraled out into just as derivative as you can get now, and I think it's gonna either collapse or just maybe just go quiet and then
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about right now is I feel like, before you were able to say like, oh, like this is pop music, this is what everyone listens to, whereas I feel like now things have diversified so much where
Yeah.
like there's a lot of different types of mainstream music out right now.
I also think that while that's still true, pop music still tries to push to be like the number one. I think it's still,
oh it absolutely does.
despite all the
Yeah.
creativity and the subgenres and genres that have split off from, where music became very what's the word? Media focused
Hmm.
or in the mainstream. Um,
But I mean, what even is pop music anymore? Like, is if Taylor Swift is pop music, then is Drake also
that
pop music? You
that
know
is
what I mean?
actually a really good question because
Yeah.
Yeah.
it poses a good question if I can't give you like such a direct answer because I'm thinking about that and like even nowadays I don't follow pop music too much but I wouldn't be able to tell you like what is pop music right now,
Right.
who is following like the pop genre right now.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that.
Ultimately, I would argue that there's still just like pop as you would just imagine it in your own head, and there's like pop hop, like hip hop that has very poppy
Pop pop.
sensibilities.
I've never heard of that.
I just made it up. Yeah.
I
That's
like
sick.
Like I would say Drake is a really good example of that hip hop pop fusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. And then like you were mentioning when we were talking the other day, Liam, like how a lot of artists they will take things that are trends nowadays and like put their own sort of spin on it.
Yeah,
And I think like it doesn't have to be a binary between like, oh, this is music that I'm making, to be successful, and this is music I'm making for my own creativity. It can be
absolutely,
a blend
absolutely.
of both things.
Yeah,
I think Kendrick Lamar was the example you brought up.
yeah. He is
Yeah.
the ultimate example in my mind, at least as someone who can make a trend his own thing
Yeah.
and does multiple times.
Yeah, sort of a non. I don't want to say conformist because that may be a little extreme, but like a artists who are willing to take their own spin on things and their own what it is they want from their music, and they can push it in this kind of media focused world, um, where everyone kind of has to. I wouldn't say everyone has to follow the same like uh expectations for every genre, but like Kendrick Lamar, like you guys have probably seen like his music videos and stuff. Like it's
Absolutely.
very creative stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it's
It
stuff
really
that
is.
like I wouldn't be able to find in anybody else's like, music video or any kind of music they put out on their own albums.
Yeah.
Another artist that kind of comes to mind, and I don't want to say she's weird, but just different. Have you ever heard of Poppy?
Yes.
I have to.
Poppy's
yeah.
a character. That is like essence creativity. Like, I don't know who's behind the strings of like that character. I hope that's totally her own original thing. But like that's some amazing stuff being put out.
Yeah.
And it's like it's her own thing. It's her own spin on what she believes her genre of music belongs to.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Poppy, but I've seen like a few of the videos. I'm kind of familiar with like what she does artistically, and it seems like a lot of her stuff, especially originally, was kind of like a social commentary, right?
Yeah, almost. It
Yeah.
felt that way. That was the vibe I got from it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I mean every subculture, every era has kind of had its like media that satirizes like whatever is mainstream.
For sure.
And yeah, I love that music is still sort of embracing that.
Just real quick, shouts to Weird Al still doing his thing. He is the king of that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Still going. I think I have accidentally seen Weird Al 4 times. I saw
Really?
him once, like just to go see him, and then every other time it's been like, "Hey, we got extra tickets," or "Hey, do you want to go?" Like, I'm like,
That's crazy.
"Sure," but I've already seen him like 2, now 3 times. Like, how does this keep happening to me? Good show though.
That's really funny.
He's really good live.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to see Weird Al sometime. Um, so yeah, and then like I guess the other aspect of like what the industry has done to musicians and artists is like kind of embracing this like celebrity culture where, maybe you could argue that sometimes the artist is more important than the art itself, you know?
Yeah, actually, I can agree with that.
Yeah. And so I guess that would be one thing that I would say is kind of unfortunate sometimes when like, because I mean we're all music people, we care about the way the music sounds, we care about, whether an album is good or not. And so I've always thought it was kind of interesting how like a lot of the popular like news media and everything is more focused on like people's personal lifestyles and things like that.
Yeah, it almost makes it so like the content or whatever music a certain artist brings out is kind of diluted in this who the artist is. It's
Yeah.
like that's more of the focus rather than their work.
And maybe not even necessarily who they are, but just like a general craze over their image.
For sure, yeah.
And I think I think image is a very important thing to talk about here because I think a lot of people who aren't big music fans would maybe argue that the image is just as important as the art. But I think that's a very tricky, and it's almost like, well, yeah, you are valuing the image, but is there really anything of substance that you're evaluating out of this? Because I haven't seen a whole lot of people bring image into an artist, like talking about a specific artist, any specific artist. I've never seen the topic of that artist's image ever be relevant unless they were just like a crazy fucked up person or something.
Unless like maybe aspects of that are brought into the art itself, But
Sure, and artists definitely do that to varying degrees, just
Yeah.
depending on what they how they want to express themselves.
But yeah, usually it's pretty irrelevant. I mean, like Kanye West comes to mind, like, how
Oh,
the
like,
the
man.
2 that come to mind, and no discredit to either of them because I actually think that they're talented regardless.
Yeah.
The 2 that come to mind are Kanye West and Ariana Grande.
Mhm.
Like it feels like their image and who they are, what is presented. There's like either a secondary or maybe even a primary following of people who are just there to like, I don't want to say worship, but they almost
Well, with Kanye, it almost gets to that point.
Yeah. that man's got power.
He does.
But their image is very important to a lot of people, and a lot of people almost base their own image in a way off of that. And it doesn't feel like an inspirational thing. It just feels kind of like a weird cult following.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on it. That's probably not true. That's just how it comes off. That's how it feels.
It definitely feels like a cult following with Kanye's
Yeah.
sort of, but it's also his persona. Like he just has to have attention.
Yeah, and
Most artists aren't really like that. They don't want attention brought to themselves.
for sure.
So I would say he's like the ultimate anomaly in music.
What's crazy, he's so good too. Like
Yeah,
he's
I
actually
love his
real.
music.
Yeah, his work is amazing.
It is great.
His character is a character though.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting in Kanye's case though, because his music is so personal, you know.
Oh yeah.
So in some
It,
cases,
it, it varies a lot. I wouldn't say Yeezus is a very personal album, but then again, the majority of his work probably is personal at the end of
yeah,
the day.
and so I feel like to some extent, knowing so much about him as a person maybe gives his music some perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. I think that's the only reason people look at Image at all. It's like we need context for why they're expressing themselves the way they are. Because
Mhm.
I find that in the mainstream eye, people get confused very easily. Because when most people hear music, they're looking for an image of an artist. I would think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think some people do. I think some people find that important.
Hmm.
Definitely. And then like kind of the other side of this is, sometimes it's not just the artist sort of like pushing their own image, but a lot of times it's the label, kind of promoting certain habits, promoting certain lifestyles, wanting their artists to be a certain way in order to get attention. And the one news article that we were just talking about is the uh, the issue with Lil Peep. He just died, a few. When was that? Like last year,
It was about a year and a half or two
year
years
and a
ago.
half ago.
It might be 2 years in this December. I think it was December 2017. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and so I was reading this article on Pitchfork that says his mother is actually suing his management over his death.
Yeah.
Because let me just like read a couple sentences from this article. Um, so the headline says Lisa Womack, I guess that's his mom, claims First Access Entertainment encouraged drug use and ignored warnings over late rapper's health. Um, Claims that Peep, who was on tour when he died, had been encouraged to use drugs by managers, including in one instance when they allegedly supplied him with a bottle of pills. She
Mm.
also says that when Peep asked to leave the tour, managers made him stay on the road. So that's pretty alarming.
It
Yeah,
definitely is.
that's a red flag for sure.
Yeah,
Like I can't even imagine being in that position of Lil Peep. Like that sounds terrifying.
yeah,
And especially if he at some point wanted to go home or at least stop what it was he was doing, and then you've got all these people who are his people, who push the label or his managers, whatever, who are involved in making Lil Peep have a concert on stage and do his thing. They're against him now all of a sudden, at least from his
yeah,
perspective. Like that'd be terrifying, and unfortunately, it came down to some really sad results.
yeah. And it really highlights how like profit is everything to the industry, like above, someone's
But
actual
people in also
well-being.
management positions seem to think that image is even more important than the art.
Hmm.
And with the little Peep example, I personally think that it wasn't just about the drugs. I feel like these managers were pushing this just to get him more into this like don't give a crap, like party all the time mentality and image.
Hmm.
And so it's almost like they're trying too hard to get like every cent they can out of him, and it just blew up like this.
Yeah.
Fortunately, killed him.
Why do you think that is, though? Like, say a label or someone who is in high management position is trying to push a certain image, behavioral habits, patterns, whatever you want to call them, that are actually well known to a large demographic. It's like, oh yeah, this is who Lil Peep is. He parties hard. He drinks. He pops these pills and stuff or whatever. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think people who are in in the music industry so heavily and who are behind these labels, what's the incentive behind that? Like, what's the drive, the push for that?
It's got to be just because like they think that that's what the audience wants, they want, because kids party all the time, they want to relate to someone who parties all the time, and so that they have to build this person up to be like, have this certain image so that he's cool, so that people like his music more. And it's unfortunate, we live in the digital age where like all that should matter like when you think about it, should be, how does the music sound? We're gonna, spread this music via word of mouth, via Spotify playlists and things like that. But like the image is still really important. And I mean, it can't be, um, you know, obviously, if they're spending so much time and money and effort maintaining this image, they've got to have a lot of marketing people who know that this actually is important, which has to reveal that that is what people are looking for to some extent. So, in a way, you could argue it's the consumer's fault.
Yeah. Although I feel like the marketing thing is also fizzling out because of platforms like Bandcamp. Not only can music artists distribute their music really easily, but they can also market themselves really easily because it's just like, here's a link to my music, go buy it.
Right.
And you just see, and also social media allows artists to have more control over their self-image nowadays. I would
I would
argue.
hope that because of all those things you mentioned, like we're currently in a transition phase where, 10 years, 20 years down the road, we won't have news stories like this where, artists are being pressured to use drugs and live a certain lifestyle just to
Hmm.
make things happen. Because, I mean, I thought we were already there now that, self-distribution, like you said, is so popular. I mean, Chance the Rapper, didn't he release all of his albums by himself? Like,
There's mixtapes.
mixtapes?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like we theoretically we shouldn't need like labels anymore to like push these images in order to sell music.
You'd
Um,
think,
yeah,
yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, since they do hold a high stature of power in the music industry, like if you want to be something big, you need a label or something like that's usually the general uh, the general belief. But like for instance, you said Bandcamp or SoundCloud could be a really good platform to push that on your own.
hmm
Well, I mean, isn't that what Post Malone did? Post
hmm
Malone, he was just a SoundCloud
yeah,
dude, and granted, yeah, he's got talent and he found the right platform to push it where he felt like he was in control of it.
hmm
But eventually, that didn't become the case. I mean, I don't know. Is all his stuff still like self push or does he? I'd
No,
imagine he
he's
has
went
some
through
kind of
labels
label.
for his full release
Yeah,
albums, I'm
right?
pretty
Like
sure.
yeah.
he got pulled in even despite having that free platform.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, also the thing is, it kind of goes into the DIY perspective of things, and some people just don't like that. They don't want to put in all the effort to press CDs or just go to, like, do that all on their own. Like, obviously, that's what the point of a record label is to manage.
Have someone do that for you.
Yeah, it's to manage all that production.
For
involved.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and the bigger you are, probably the harder it is to do all that yourself.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but it's interesting to me when I contrast like between how music industry works and like how the film industry works, for example, where actors, as far as I understand it, they'll usually have their own like personal managers that they hire to like get deals and negotiate things and manage their calendar and things like that. And it's interesting to me that, I mean, I don't know how accurate of a comparison this is, but it seems like in the music industry the alternative to that is like you sign a record label and you sell your soul away so that this big business can manage everything for you. It's kind of interesting to me like why it works so differently,
Yeah. Did Elias just make a film reference when Dante's not around?
I gotta fill in for him.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
man.
Today is a good day. No, yeah, I see what you're saying. It does require that sort of managerial attention at some point. Like I like imagine like the next day like someone picks up your stuff or someone listens to your stuff and they give you an opportunity for you to take care of everything so long as you're the one pushing for it and you're actually uh, making your content and your creative work become mainstream, or rather, you're the one managing it. They will make it mainstream for you. Like they'll make sure everyone hears your stuff. Like here's Elias, here's all his work, but you're the one taking care of all the wet work and all of like the nitty gritty details that require such a large staff. Like I don't think you would be able to do like not singling you out or anything. I don't think anyone would be
Right.
able to do that for more than like 3 days. That's a lot to handle.
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I feel like when you're an actor in film, it's kind of the same thing. If you're in stardom, if you're, I don't want to say an idol, because I mean I guess that's true to some people, but when you're at that point, it's like you kind of need that backup for
Mhm.
sure.
Definitely.
And I will say, I think it's important for most artists to have some sort of manager, but they don't have to go to a record label to do that. There are people who just manage professionally and they are independent. And I think that'll become more important in the music sphere, especially when you have all this easy access to self-publishing.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
hope that that becomes the norm one day.
I think it will. Honestly, I think
Yeah.
at least in the past, like things tend to fade out as the better, or I would not better, but the more viable option for a larger number of people becomes like, oh, this makes more sense for us to do this rather than stick to the things we've been doing that don't really blend well with the environment right now. I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to say that about record labels and the music industry because music will always be, at least from going forward. I think music will always be plugged into the media. I feel like that will always be a thing going forward. It's just a matter
Absolutely,
of
yeah.
how people get plugged in now is, I think, what may change. Hopefully over time.
Yeah. So, do you guys think that it's possible that in the future, thanks to the internet, like self-publishing on Bandcamp and YouTube and stuff like that could become the norm and kind of replace these like record labels and stuff like that?
I think it will, but I think it'll take a long time to truly become the norm. I think streaming services like Spotify, like anyone can get their music on Spotify now, so that part of the process has become a lot easier. I think there might be a full shift to digital streaming slash YouTube slash whatever you want to call it in the next 10 years. What I think the big deal right now though is artists understanding that if you're gonna market yourself online, you want to try to go viral in some way, and I think like making your own music videos is probably the best avenue for that. But
Yeah.
there are plenty of other ways.
Yeah, I think perhaps going off what Liam said, yeah, it probably would take a lot of time. Um, but hopefully, because I don't know what it is, but at least when it comes to the kind of creativity that you see like from content creators on YouTube, especially music oriented, like some of the stuff there, it's fantastic. It's stuff that I think deserves a bit more attention. No?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm not sure, like, I would hope that you don't have to, like, do something, like, crazy and viral in order to, like, be financially successful with that, but I do think that would be a large part of it, too. I would hope that, like, we kind of naturally progress towards, music discovery is already becoming a lot better thanks to, like, Spotify's algorithms and things like that. People
Mm-hmm.
are just discovering music without it needing to be advertised, which I think is really wonderful, and especially as, like, a lot of those algorithms are using machine learning to kind of like find similar sounding music, and I think that will kind of transform people's ability to not need to market themselves. Just
Yeah.
make the music, make it appealing, and then it will go to the right places. I think that would be a really wonderful.
That is
Yeah.
actually something I've not thought about at all. Yeah, algorithms' role in getting music spread out there because Spotify does do a good job at that.
Yeah,
I can
definitely.
attest to that personally.
Yeah, I could be listening to something pretty general on Spotify, and then, they'll recommend me like someone I've never heard of, but it's kind of like in the same niche,
Hmm.
and it sounds really good. It's like, oh yeah, this is great. Never heard of these guys before. 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's how I
Spotify
discover a
does
lot
that
of my
great.
artists. Yeah, nowadays, yeah, it's usually like Spotify or Last FM. A lot of really good recommendation algorithms out there.
I think Last FM was on the forefront of trying to do that. That's why there were a lot of music nerds who signed up for that way back in the day, and that's why I signed up for it because it is a great way to amalgamate your listening habits and try to find new artists to listen to from that.
Hmm.
It's definitely something that people have wanted for a long, long time, but no one ever really thought about it until someone made like a website like Last FM or a streaming service like Spotify.
Yeah, um, I think obviously the main competitor for that kind of push for the how artists are being discovered now is the big head honcho of the mainstream media of music, um, and that's a tough competitor for sure. Uh, Mainstream media music, it'll be blown into everyone's face, like whether or not like sometimes I'll go get like a sandwich at like a food place, and there'll be songs that are like considered mainstream media music that it gets kind of repetitive, but I think that's the point. They're
Right.
trying to push that music all the time. This is what the new hot big thing, and that's a lot to compete with from someone who's trying to get their voice out, like say, using Spotify as a platform or using YouTube, SoundCloud. Like it's very overbearing. It's hard to compete with.
I mean, at the same time, though, I feel like, 15 years ago or so, like, you would know what all of the current popular songs are because you're always, like, listening to the radio or
Or
whatever.
someone in your
Sure,
life
sure.
is. No
Yeah,
one listens. I can't think of anyone in my life listens to the radio anymore.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that, like, at least for me now, like, I didn't even hear Sicko Mode until, like, a year after that came out, and that was apparently, like, the biggest song ever.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
and so, yeah, I think kind of the great thing about like this new like self-discovery, self-publishing era is that there is no, at least I don't think there is really a like singular monolithic mainstream anymore.
Yeah, it's much more diverse.
Yeah, and I think that'll help definitely the push towards people making it on their own, and not like I know you kind of said having to like compete with like mainstream media music, but it almost seems like we're reaching a time where that might not be the case.
Right. I think in the present, that's that's definitely a factor. But I think we could come to an agreement that eventually, perhaps the people pushing for their own content eventually becomes the louder voice in
Right.
all this. I would
Yeah.
hope so. That'd be great.
I think it's gonna happen relatively soon.
Yeah. Although what's interesting to think about, and I kind of just thought about this, is that remember when YouTube came out, that was supposed to be like, for a while it was, any person with a webcam, could be viral. And, most
Yeah.
of the videos we were all watching were just random people, who had a funny idea or whatever. And it seems
Hmm.
like YouTube has become very like corporate and controlled.
Commercialized. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's taken a complete 180.
Hmm.
It's no different from like, I guess how television would have ran like when I was growing
Well,
up.
that's what they
It feels,
want.
yeah, it's very similar,
Yeah.
and
I worry about the same thing happening to music, you know, because I feel like all the things we were talking about how like self-publishing and self-discovery and all that kind of thing, and related videos and algorithms. YouTube used to be all about that, and now it's about like they're trying to push their premium thing, and
Yeah,
like
that is concerning. Like,
yeah,
imagine like going on a SoundCloud and then having to listen to like a 15-second ad before any track you played. Like, that would be awful, and
yeah,
that could really make like self-publishing really difficult to navigate because you need to make money off of that platform somehow, and advertising is the most direct way. But at the same time, you're going to be annoying a lot of your potential customers. So it's like, do you take the ad money now, or could you just take your fans' good faith later? Like, most record label types are not avid about that at all, and frankly, there's a reason for that. And like for artists, they're going to have to make that choice on their own, and so that might become the more difficult aspect of this conversation.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I hope that that doesn't become the norm. I mean, I could see it with like, because Spotify is really huge right now. Everyone uses Spotify, and I
Yeah.
think if they like monopolize things too much, then, it could become a thing where they're just promoting, they become the new record company basically, where
I
they're
don't think
right.
I don't think streaming platforms are going to become monopolized because Apple has their own implementation of it. There's Tidal. There are a bunch of streaming services all offering different like perks
yeah,
for each service. Like Tidal advertises like incredible streaming quality like that you won't get with other services. And there is something to that. But like even I use Spotify. Like most people are going to gravitate towards the first of its kind, and Spotify was the first platform, at least that I'm aware of, that allow you to fully stream any song or album that you could think of that was
Hmm.
available there.
Yeah, and kind of equating that to like, to say like YouTube, kind of where it is right now. Uh, I don't, I don't think like, I don't think Spotify or music as a whole. I don't. I would hope that there is no possible monopoly for that kind of stuff because that would be. I feel like that takes away a lot from the content creators or what is the people who push for their own creations and their own music. Like for instance, I guarantee you, if say YouTube for example, YouTube right now, I'm sure you guys are like aware, like content creators are getting choked right now. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
restrictions and stuff. Um, that being said, I guarantee you, if someone created a brand new platform very similar to YouTube, where the restrictions and all of like the regulations and what it means to actually be like a verified content creator and to actually make a living from YouTube, I guarantee you, if a new platform came out that did something very similar to YouTube, a lot of content creators would ditch YouTube and go straight over there. That being said, what I believe is if something were to happen to music, if Monopoly or whatever, there's always that next thing that tries to push away from that.
Hmm.
And
Well, I think the real issue here is like static content versus like I don't want to call it dynamic content, but when you're talking about a service like YouTube, like that's just you uploading a video. And yes, they have streaming services, but this is my point: is that when you're looking at YouTube, like it's just a video that you have to edit yourself, or maybe a professional production, but usually it's like a one-man effort for
sure,
someone
yeah,
like YouTube, and that's why YouTube alternatives don't really take off because there's no user base there. Whereas with streaming services, even in video game streaming, competition is relatively easier to establish. Like Twitch now has competition. Twitch TV has competition.
it's the new Microsoft
Yeah, Mixify or
Mixer or something.
Mixer. Yeah, that's what it's called. Where so it's kind of I feel like there's kind of a fundamental difference between a platform where you literally just upload something, or where it's literally streamed to someone. Where because in a streaming environment, you want a lot of the control, and that's why so many different streaming platforms for music have such a wide user base. But with video game streaming, that's just way more narrow. That's why only Microsoft has competition there.
Sure, and you bring up a good point. I agree with you. The only reason why I pose the questions when like kind of comparing, say, something like YouTube and a streaming service is what makes it so that the streaming services, or I guess now going back to music as a whole, what makes it have immunity from that kind of uh, control from like the people, kind of like what makes it immune from the stuff that was happening to YouTube content creators? What makes it immune to the people who are trying to upload their own work through Spotify or
I think
any kind of musical creative platform?
I think one element to it is that like your tastes will never truly die with music.
Mhm.
Like you'll want to go back and listen to the old stuff. Whereas with like videos or TV, well, TV shows are a little bit weirder. But
Yeah.
like with like videos uploaded to YouTube, you're probably not going to rewatch most of that stuff.
For sure.
So there's a pressure to constantly have this like just this almost like a stream of sewage of content. At least from my
Yeah, I
opinion.
didn't
That's
even think
fair,
about
yeah.
that.
It's a
I
good
was
point.
gonna say, like, I guess it's kind of related to that, but like, I feel like marketing experts in music kind of acknowledge the diversity of taste in music,
Exactly.
and I think that that suits the customer, that suits the consumers well because if there's an acknowledgement that some people are going to gravitate towards metal, some people are going to gravitate towards hip hop or dream pop or indie rock or whatever, the more of that diversity is acknowledged, the less incentive there is to like try and standardize everything and monopolize everything and only promote one or two artists at the forefront.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I would hope that, to answer your question, kind of like prevents music from going down that road of being too like corporate and controlled.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's going in the opposite direction because
Yeah.
of the internet, but we'll see.
we will.
Yeah. So one of the issues going on right now, and one of the things that might make it difficult for this kind of self-publishing phenomenon to really take off, is the issue of artists finding it difficult to be paid enough. Especially on a lot of these streaming platforms where people are taking issue with Spotify and taking issue with their labels and things like that. And I wonder if that'll continue to be a problem going forward. With I would hope that a lot of these services, because they know they have to appeal to artists, they would kind of be competing, for the artists and trying to raise their payouts in that way. Like I know Bandcamp has definitely tried to. They have a higher payout than like iTunes and things like that, especially for self-publishers. But I wonder if that's going to be a consistent back and forth going forward.
Sure.
Well, I
Um,
think one thing that's going on, right, or one thing that will develop in the next few years is that there's going to be an interesting dichotomy between do you maintain your online presence with that self publishing, or do you just try to maintain your touring presence? Because touring is where you're going to make most of your money for most acts. Obviously, something radical and experimental, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of people showing up to your concerts, so you're probably going to have to market yourself a little bit differently, but that's a much more individualized issue. The issue at hand is that. Um, is the internet getting in the way too much, possibly, or is it not getting in the way enough?
well, so I guess because I've heard this whole kind of controversy going on. Like, I guess for an example, is Spotify isn't exactly they're not paying certain artists like what they're owed, or maybe you guys could educate me better on that whole situation as a whole
I'm
because I've heard
honestly,
about it, but I don't know too much about it.
yeah, I'm not too familiar with the specific details. The impression I was under a couple years ago when I was reading about a lot of this is that normally, depending on the specific deal, it'll be like Spotify pays the record companies like first, and then they're expected to pay the artist a certain amount, and sort of that's where the discrepancy is.
Yeah.
But I've also heard recently about like Spotify's supposed to be paying the artists as well, and it's only like point whatever cents per stream.
I've heard
And
figures of like
Wow.
6 cents per stream,
yeah,
and that
Jeez.
is
Yeah.
really low.
Yeah, that could be rough. I
yeah,
mean, some people they'll hit the replay button a couple times, or I mean, what like Spotify, people get certain artists, at least probably the bigger ones get the advantage here, but they've got a couple million people, pushing their tracks every day, right? Like that's
yeah.
got to be the normal for them.
Hmm.
I'd imagine that kind of attention is best for the people who are in the mainstream. So I guess that does beg the the question: are the people who are trying to push themselves, who aren't don't have that big of a following yet, is this something that they can take off from? Like, is there any money in them for them? Because you got to make money somehow.
Hmm.
Despite you're making what it is that you love and you're being passionate about your work, like you got to get paid for that.
Yeah,
You got to live, especially if that's what they're trying to do, like full time.
yeah. I would hope that like I said, the payout needs to be more in order for the smaller artists to really make it,
I agree. Yeah.
or I mean, like I guess to play devil's advocate for a second, you could argue that you just need to make music that people will want to replay, and then the money will come that way. But perhaps it could be met in the middle a little bit. I think it's I think music listening habits have also changed. Where um, in before Napster, before the internet, you bought an album and you listened to it
Yeah, you had to
numerous
go to a
times.
store and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people definitely gravitated more towards fewer like albums and fewer artists, and so maybe I think part of the problem, but also part of what's awesome about the internet is the fact that you can listen to so many different things, throughout your day, throughout your week, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting going forward to see if there's a way to market, if there's a way to make money just through streaming and pay them more. Because also the problem is you have to look at from the business perspective of if they're going to pay out more money to the artist, then where is that money coming from?
Right.
Are we going to see more ads in our streaming services? Are we going to see the prices go up in those streaming services? I mean, Spotify as it stands right now, I can't recall what the most recent news on this, but I remember for a while they were not turning any profits at all.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah,
I never even heard about that.
yeah. Spotify for a while they were not publicly traded, and so they were just building up that audience basically, and like pouring like whatever money they made back into the company, and not turning any profit.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is probably why it took so long, while the internet was still around. You normally it was just selling music through iTunes. I think that might be why it took so long for Spotify to come to the U.S. and for streaming services to really take off, is because it's really hard for the money to be made.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one solution, and I always advocate if you like an album, you probably should be buying it on Bandcamp, or you should be buying a CD of it, because right now that's sort of just that's how artists make money, or going to the concerts, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, I wonder if that'll always need to be the case, or if there'll be some sort of magic that can happen with streaming services where they can just, churn out more money for these artists.
That'd be great. And I feel like that is, since that is an area that has been brought up, or it's an issue. It's an issue for a lot of artists nowadays. At some point, you can hope that it'll be addressed and that there will be some sort of solution that can unfold from that. Because I personally think if you're going to actually commit to that kind of content creation and trying to make a name for yourself, like it definitely should be rewarded, regardless. Like if you're a small time person or if you're a big time person, like I think I wouldn't say equal recognition because that's kind of virtually impossible, but
Right.
um, I think it would be nice just that those people get what they deserve
Exactly.
in the long run.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they are providing a service for the people who listen to their music.
Sure, yeah.
And the more people listen to their music, I feel like the more they deserve to be able to make a living off of that. That's what the market is supposed to provide. But yeah, I don't know what the way forward is, or what the solution is, or how things are going to change and evolve over time. But I did recently hear about this new platform. I don't know how new it is, but I just heard about it. That's a cooperatively owned streaming platform called Resonate.
Hmm.
I'm on their website right now because this just came to mind. I was like, we can't miss an opportunity to bring this up because it's very relevant here. But I guess it's co-owned by the people who are, the artists who are on the website. There's
Oh,
some sort of
okay.
like what's it called? Like they're like everyone's an investor, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, it says rewiring the music industry, building a new music economy based on fairness, transparency, and cooperation.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing. How recent is this?
I believe it was like being worked on for a while, and then like I want to say earlier this year, it like kind of, they like made announcements about like making it a thing.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, for artists, this means owning their work and owning their networks, all about fairness and control. We allow creators to set the terms on which to distribute their art.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm actually just looking at it right now.
Um,
So this is essentially a streaming service that also almost acts as like a record label as well, but in a much more straightforward manner.
yeah, sort of. It looks
Okay.
like. Yeah, one member, one share, one vote system brings democracy to the platform. So it's like, yeah, it's like all the artists sort of have a say in like how the streaming platform works and like how payments work and everything.
It's really
Um,
good.
and it's also a stream to own. So it's like if you stream whatever song, it looks like 9 times, then how does it work? Is it like you pay every time? But
I
like,
saw that.
yeah,
I was curious on that.
yeah, eventually you get to just like download the song, which is also cool because that's probably one of the problems with Spotify, is you never really own the music you're listening
Yeah,
to.
and,
True.
and and I'll be frank. I think that's something that appeals to me at least is knowing that I'm directly supporting the artist. That's why I've used Bandcamp for a number of times to support some of my favorite artists because you know that you're directly supporting them. Whereas when you're streaming just a song on Spotify, you don't really know what that's gonna do for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never actually thought about that. Like it feels different from going on Spotify, and if I want to listen to System of a Down and I
Yeah.
put on just a random track of theirs, it feels a bit different than when I was younger and I went out and I bought physical albums from them. It feels like a different kind of support.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will also say it's very unfortunate that CDs in general are kind of being moved away. Like, have you guys heard that Best Buy's put like they're like moving CDs off the shelf and it's all in the bar
No, I
right
didn't
now?
know about that.
Yeah, this has been going on since the beginning of the year.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did pick up Black Sabbath self-titled for $6 from that, so that's great.
nice.
Future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too bummed about that because I don't really have much use for CDs anymore.
Yeah, there's really no more practical use for it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I will say, as someone who's a huge fan of streaming, I do like owning physical copies of CDs because at least I know for a fact I'll always have that music. That's why I own every Tool CD physically because I want access to that music until I die, literally.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, one could argue that if Spotify plus piracy could, for the convenience sake, replace like, needing to own something, right?
Well, it's funny you call it piracy because artists will put their own music on torrenting platforms as well.
Yeah.
But that also,
it's kind of like another weird outlet. I
yeah,
suppose,
yeah,
if
yeah,
that's
that
how
is
to
a
look at
particularly
it.
weird outlet because you're just kind of throwing your music into the wind,
Yeah.
Yeah.
basically.
But yeah, I think we all kind of knew with as soon as the internet became a thing, as soon as we were able to transfer large files, across the globe, it was kind of inevitable that there'd be an issue of like us sort of valuing music less, because
Sure.
all of it's so available to us.
It's so accessible now. It's completely different from before it was around, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And so I hope that we can sort of like moving forward encourage more of a culture of like, you're enjoying this music, so you need to be, supporting these artists in whatever way that is, whether it's buying merch or going to concerts or paying on Bandcamp, so that they can continue to make the music that we enjoy.
Yeah, I definitely want to keep the love for the artists in the music industry, no matter what, no matter where it goes. I think that's very important to stick around.
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to bring up on any of these topics?
Um, I I don't know. Because I think the thing is as long as you have some means of putting your music out there, regardless of how efficient it is for payment, someone's gonna use it.
Hmm.
Like you should be paid for your work, but also people just love putting art out there and just seeing others' reactions to it.
Yeah, that's definitely one perspective to take. That, if for some people, just the fact that other people are enjoying their work, that's a payment of its own. That could
Oh
be
yeah,
argued.
yeah.
That definitely doesn't invalidate the need for them to make a living, especially in today's economy. But there's definitely something to be said for the I guess just the culture of like creating things for the enjoyment of other people, rather than expecting something in return. And I think that mindset also helps music to be more creative and more self-expressive.
I would
Absolutely.
agree completely. Like I guess someone who comes to mind like that is I'm not like a super follower or like a fan or follower of her, but I started listening to Billie Eilish because at some
Okay.
point like
Yeah.
her content got to my ears. She's getting really popular and her music is amazing. Um, a lot of her stuff is very free expressive, and I think a lot of that is driven from she has a message to who may be listening,
Hmm.
whom the point of the song may concern. I feel like she's very endearing about the her lyrics and what she's trying to tell the audience, and that promotes a very unique kind of creativity. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like her concerts, her outfits, her music
Oh
videos.
yeah.
It's different stuff.
She's
It's
super out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
extremely, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of that, like as you said, or paraphrasing again, is driven from the kind of the intention back towards the fans in a way,
Yeah.
for the love of the fans.
Definitely. Yeah, going forward, that's a really important mindset for musicians to have. And, of course, it's always up to whoever's making the art, why they want to make the art, of course.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, I do think that's something that results in a lot of really good art being put out there. It's just the mindset of like, I'm making this because I want other people to dance to this or to, enjoy it however they want.
One person I do want to bring up in this conversation because he has done so well to market himself through not only his music but his image and his music videos is Oliver Tree. I'm sure you've heard
Oh
of him.
yes,
He is
yeah.
excellent, and I think that he is paving the way for how artists are going to promote themselves on platforms like YouTube because his music videos are crazy
Yeah.
and they fit his image so well.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like you need that kind of self awareness to really hone in on how you're gonna do this well. Like
Sure, yeah.
like he definitely Oliver Tree definitely has like a very unique and driven.
It's authentic.
Yeah, it's very
It's
authentic.
genuine.
You can tell, even though like his music is kind of cheesy on some level, it's more enjoyable than like typical cheesy music because it's self-referential, it's ironic, like he understands all that. He
Yeah,
has a sense of humor to it.
for sure.
And so that might be the big thing. It's like if you're going to promote yourself as an artist, regardless of if you're just purely a musician, because I do feel like he's also a visual entertainer, like not just his music videos, but his concert experiences. Like I saw this video on Twitter a few days ago. He broke his leg, or like not like his leg, but like some part of his leg. So he was in a wheelchair, like with the audience going like
Yes.
this. It was so fun just to see that. Like it's definitely. I feel like arts are definitely gonna be pushed more to be more like just out there and kind of like defying the norms,
Yeah.
or at the same time kind of being ironic about it.
That kind of speaks to what you were saying earlier about how, like, in order to make it on, YouTube and whatever platforms, it definitely helps to have kind of an edge, kind of be, out there and
Yeah,
creative
absolutely.
and go viral in some way. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I like that a lot because it keeps music fresh and interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I think we're gonna wrap it up right there if that's cool with you guys.
Yeah, I think great discussion, great things being shared. Yeah, I think good place to call it.
Yes. So yeah, thank you all for listening. We tried a little bit of a different format this time. Let us know in the comments whether you liked this episode. I'm sure you all liked this episode, how much you liked this episode. And join the Discord server where you can share tunes with us and give us further feedback and everything. Subscribe on YouTube, SoundCloud, everywhere. And yeah, thanks again, everyone.